right. Thank you for having me. It really is an incredible pleasure, and I want to thank the Electoral Commission for putting this event together, for asking me to come, and for taking on this conversation now. It actually was not an easy sell to convince me to leave. We had a very long winter and fly halfway around the world for 26 hours to stand here and talk to all of you. But I can tell you it is, just the few days I've been here already have been incredible. And I, just beyond Rock the Vote, have this incredibly strong belief that democracy matters and that the strength of a democracy is determined by the participation of its citizens. And I am so honored to be here as all of you tackle this conversation and this question of how to curb declining participation here in your country before it bottoms out, when it may be too late. In the US, I have some real experience with this, and I'm eager to bring that here and share it with all of you. But first, let me tell you about my organization. Rock the Vote. We were founded 24 years ago, right around 1990. We were founded by artists and musicians, so folks in the entertainment community who, at that exact moment, were facing something in the US. They were trying to censor music. There was a band called Two Live Crew. Some of you may or may not have heard of them. Really bad music, actually, but you still couldn't censor it. And they were trying to stop people from selling it. They're trying to put labels on it in the US Congress. And for the first time, this artistic community got really fired up, right? And they said, wait a minute, like, these old white dudes in Washington, D.C. are deciding things like what music we can produce and what we can listen to. We need to get involved and do something. That kind of evolved over the next few years and eventually became Rock the Vote, which was a campaign that called for freedom of speech and artistic expression. And it called on young people in particular to raise their voices and fight for the issues that they care about. This is our very first campaign poster. And I show it to you in part because I think it speaks to a message that has worked and carried us for the last 24 years, which is that it talks about rights and freedoms as young people. It talks about us as a generation, our creativity, and it taps into a transformational idea and a pride in our country. It's a takeoff the Uncle Sam poster. But over the past 24 years, Rock the Vote has become the largest youth political organization in the US. We've run the largest voter engagement efforts on record in the United States in the past 6 presidential election cycles. For a sense of scale, this year we have a midterm election, so a non-presidential election. And we're on track to register about 1.5 million young people to vote and have about 4.5 million young people who are engaged in our programs this year, and we will turn out to the polls. It is about double that in a presidential year. Of course, this is in a country where when we say young people, we talk about 46 million eligible voters under the age of 30. So our programs include a set of things. We do voter registration, education, and turnout. We do efforts to fight for the rights of young people to vote and cast a ballot. And ultimately, we have an innovation lab. And that is a place where we are always looking forward and innovating new ways to upgrade our election system to make it work better for young people and the 21st century voter. We're a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse candidates or support parties or take sides. We think this is really important. We rather support young people and empower them to step up and claim their voices in the political process. We don't tell them what to do. We give them the information to make up their own minds. And our success has ultimately relied on a whole community of partners, a community across our country who are committed to ensuring that young people are engaged in the political process. This is artists and musicians who donate their time year in, year out, to raise awareness around our issues and just really create a culture of cool around voting for us. It relies on media outlets who take our message and help us disseminate both our message as well as critical information about elections. We work with all the political parties. We actually do trainings on how to better engage voters under 30 and give them the tools to actually go out and spend their own resources engaging those voters. We leverage new technology to scale and better distribute our message and to actually do the asking of millions of people if they'll register and participate. And finally, our secret weapon is young people themselves. So there's about 150,000 volunteers working with us today who engage, volunteer, and shape the campaign in each of their unique communities. And they do this every year around every election. And that's coordinated by a little tiny staff of incredible young folks themselves. There's about 12 of us who work full-time. So that's just to give you a sense of who we are and the kind of work that we do. But rather than going through every single program we have, I chose a video. Figured, you've been looking at graphs all day, right? A video about a project that we ran in 2012 called Spin the Vote. It is a way to show by example what our work looks like and just give you an image so in a reference point as we go through the rest of the session. I helped launch this project in 2010. You'll see the 2012 version of it. It is a specific, so we work very specifically with different projects for a bazillion different communities. This one is a project geared towards the EDM community. It's like the new Bono, David. It's electronic music, and it is the fastest growing kind of music subculture in America and widely popular worldwide. We created a nuanced application of our voter engagement model to really speak to this community. Create a program that felt like it was theirs so they could really own it, and also give them ways to engage and participate in it so they could expand it and kind of shape it to meet their own needs. You'll see in here we leverage and work with artists and musicians, in this case DJs, to kind of make it cool and spread the word, because they've got, Cascade sends out a text and we can get 10,000 people to show up wearing all white and dancing in the street around something. We need that to share the message. But then you'll see the individual volunteers who, contacted us, or we met them out on the street and said, do you want to help out? And they put on a t-shirt and a clipboard and joined us in talking to their friends in a peer-to-peer way. You'll see some of the tactics that we use. And ultimately, you'll watch us go across the country to, I think it's 3 different festivals, already planned festivals, where we're executing the Spin the Vote campaign. Here we go.
Tell me it's alright.
Hi guys, it's Spin the Vote, and we are at Electric Daisy Carnival in Las Vegas. It's going to be super massive, and we are here in the important swing state of Nevada to register passionate EDM fans so they can have a voice, fight for their right to dance, fist bump for freedom, whatever goes. We just want you to spin the vote.
What's up? My name's Cascade. You need to go out and vote. Spin the vote. Spin the vote.
Hey, what's up? This is Morgan Page reminding you to spin the vote. Your vote counts, so don't forget to vote this year.
Just Diplo. Mother spin the vote.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. Strange. I'm feeling it. In the air.
This is a massive community of young people who are often ignored and underrepresented, and they have a chance to get their voice heard this year in an amazingly important election. And so we're here to gather them together, get them registered to vote, and let them know that there is power in this community.
We really have to come together and make a difference in the world.
Fight for your right to dance. It's the only thing left to do.
Hi, I'm Paul Van Dyke. Register to Spin the Vote in 2012.
Change in the air. To look the other way, to get what you want.
Without freedom, you have nothing. There is no festivals like this unless we make ourselves heard. So we gotta go. It's you, it's me, it's our life, it's our generation. We have to make what happens happen.
Today, while volunteering for Spin the Vote, yeah, I had a really great experience. So it's been really awesome to meet so many different diverse idea people.
You guys should go support Spin the Vote. It takes no time at all, and you're making a bigger difference in the world. Go out and do it.
Our Latino project is called Trend Your Voice. It looks very different than that. Our Native Vote project is called Native Vote. And that is way more on the ground and in a very different kind of look and feel, a different type of music. But we do try to kind of generate ways to create a platform for young people to express themselves and get engaged in registering and casting a ballot. So I thought I'd try to fit in just a little bit and give you my own version of a graph, maybe build some credibility with the academics in the room after that. So here are some results from that project, the Spin the Vote project, and the others that we ran like it in 2012. We have a model that we use to register, engage, and turn out voters. And you'll see on the these are some of the projects. So we had a Chicks Rock, Chicks Vote project for single young women. We had our African American project. We had our Hispanic Trend Your Voice project. So looking at all of them across these different segments, you can see on the left, this is all new voters, so voters who are on the rolls for the very first time in 2012, and their turnout. And then on the right, the two columns on the right, the difference will mean very little to you, but those are the people who are involved in our projects and campaigns who are also new voters on the rolls. So if you kind of compare apples to apples, any new voter who is young, female, under 30, who got on the rolls turned out on their own at 61%. If they went through a Rock the Vote project or program, they turned out around 73%. So you're starting to kind of see that impact. And then my final attempt at academia, when you look at those voters that are Rock the Vote voters under 30, you'll also see that we weren't just targeting the easy-to-reach people, we're actually bringing new voters into the rolls with these programs that were targeted at reaching out to and engaging in these specifically underrepresented communities. So on this chart, you'll see turnout. The green bar is all new voters on the rolls in 2012. The blue grass is all the Rock the Vote registrants and their turnout rate. You'll see that they're significantly higher, as we saw in the last one, but the distribution of our voters, you'll see on the bottom, show that we had predominantly low propensity voters that we were bringing into the process compared to the overall new voters on the rolls. And we're still increasing their turnout sometimes by as much as 10 to 20 points. Anyways, how'd we do it? So, ready? This is like the story of my life. But it was, well, we'll see if you understand. Basically, I was a young activist. I was working on environmental issues, and I was working in communities, and I was, training students and my own peers. We were young, and we were winning these victories one after the other, and it was incredible. I was then brought on by a number of organizations to help lead a national campaign to protect roadless areas in our national forests. And I thought, well, cool. And so we had organizers and students all across the country who were working with us, and we were calling on President Clinton at the time to protect these final areas in our national forests. And one day I got a phone call from the White House. I was 22. I was sitting in my office, my cute new apartment in Boston, and they're like, Heather Smith. I said, yes, it's this White House. And I was like, JJ, stop prank calling me. I think it's my brother. They're like, no, really, ma'am, this is the White House. And I'm like, oh, shit. But they asked if I could be in DC the next day. I bought my first cell phone and my first suit, and I got on an airplane, and I got to Washington, DC. The next morning, I was standing right next to President Clinton as he announced the protection of 16 million acres of roadless areas in the national forests in the U.S. I really thought I could retire, to be honest. Like, woo, that was easy. Unfortunately, a few months later, there was a new president elected, and one of the first things that he did was overturn the Roadless Rule. So I had to come out of retirement, and I was quite honestly devastated. And so I started talking to my friends and my peers and my colleagues, going, what do we do? We have to do something. And we realized that no matter what we care about and how we wanted to shape our future, if we weren't participating in the political process, if we weren't showing up and electing people who are accountable to us, none of it would ever matter. So we thought, all right, well, let's look at the voter turnout. And we started looking at the numbers, and lo and behold, young people in America at that time were turning out around 36%. Only 1 in 3, compared to about 50 to 60% of overall. Like, well, no kidding, we're getting the short end of the stick. Let's figure out how we engage our peers, our people who are under 30 in the political process. Let's make a plan. So I went and actually approached the foundation that was funding our environmental work, and I said, hey, look, we have to do something about this. It is a problem because the issues we care about aren't getting addressed. But it's a problem for our democracy, and I'm glad I now have a research-based term to describe it. But what we said is, look, it's a habit, and if we don't start voting when we're younger, you don't start voting again when you're older. And this problem of plummeting participation amongst young people that went from 52% in 1972 right down to 36% in the late 90s is going to be a problem not just for young people and what they cared about, but for the future of our democracy, because if they don't start voting young, they're not going to start voting in the future, and we're going to have, well, I guess you wouldn't call it a democracy anymore. And so, we have to do something, and they agreed. They said, okay, fine, let's look at what the problem is. And we actually came up with this same idea that you all were sharing today. We called it the cycle of mutual neglect. We thought we were really smart, right? And what it was is like, listen, if young people aren't voting, of course politicians aren't addressing our issues, and they're not going to campaign to us, so then politics feels totally irrelevant. So why the heck would we go show up and vote for something that doesn't matter at all to our lives and our communities? And because we don't show up, then of course it happens again. And so you have this perpetuating cycle that we heard about throughout the day. So we said, well, shoot, let's stop it. We'll break the cycle. And so this is a plan that we put together to break that cycle of mutual neglect, both by forcing candidates to start paying attention to us and by encouraging and engaging and mobilizing millions and millions of additional young voters. And we called it the 7-year plan. We started this is now around 2000, doing a whole bunch of research. This was phase 1. The research was what I refer to as randomized field experiments for democracy. They're kind of like drug trials. But we kind of split everyone in half. In this group, they got a knock on the door, and this group didn't. And then we could isolate the impact of that knock on the door. It's fairly kind of common now in political science, but at the time it was unheard of. We actually identified 2 professors at Yale University, Don Green and Alan Gerber. Green and Gerber, Don and Alan. I've spent more time with them and their wives than I probably have my own family, as we figured out how to apply this kind of game theory and understand research that can give us real results, not survey results, but impact in the field results to understand what's working and not to turn a voter out. We evaluated all sorts of tactics, from knocks on the door to phone calls made to that door hanger you saw from the Move On that came out of our research, timing, frequency of these tactics. And we basically learned something that was pretty common sense, but we wanted to be able to prove it. If you ask someone, they're more likely to vote. And the more personal that form of contact is, the more effective it is at mobilizing them. So we had all sorts of data now. We've done these randomized tests. We've kind of have our initial findings. So phase 2 was to take the model, was to build a model and take it to, and try it. So we built a model that included registering every 18 to 24-year-old to vote that we could find, then doing a personal peer-to-peer contact that said, will you pledge to vote on election day? 99% of the people say yes. We then sent them via email or text message the basic information they may need, and then on election day or sometimes the day before, we call them and said, hey, thanks for taking that pledge to vote. Just want to make sure you have everything you need. We look forward to seeing you at the polls today. So that was the kind of construct of the model. I then went out with 152 of my closest friends, and we staffed a project across 6 states where we took that model to scale. In those 6 states in 2004, we registered one out of every 4 18 to 24-year-old in person. We contacted about half of them through the full contact model, but at least everybody received the email or text. And on election day, 2004, in those 6 states, we saw voter turnout increase by 14 percentage points. Oh, cool, it worked. Here's something we'll come back to. The only bummer about that night is that everyone assumed young people vote Democrat. And the Democratic candidate did not win that election. And so the headline the very next day is, young voter turnout a bust. And I'm sitting there looking, and it's like 4 in the morning, we haven't slept in weeks, and I'm looking at the AP story coming out and going, the increase in turnout between 2000 and 2004 is the largest single increase in turnout ever between 2 election cycles for young people. But because there's some assumption about their partisan nature, and apparently enough of them didn't turn out to shape some outcome, it was a bust. So we added narrative and media to our model, and then kind of moved forward from there. The kind of next phase of our model after the kind of research, the testing of the model in 6 states, was ultimately to share it. We knew we couldn't do it alone. So we built a whole bunch of infrastructure to start sharing and forcing the implementation of this model. When we started working with candidates, our research showed that a candidate contact had a 14-point increase in turnout. Now remember, this is a decade ago, but that whole relevance thing, right? Shoot, when they actually reach out, it matters. So we set up a nonprofit that worked with consultants, pollsters, and campaign professionals to train parties across the aisle. For us, it was the Democrats and Republicans to actually learn this model that we've just proven actually works. We did briefings and trainings, hundreds and hundreds of them over the next few years. We set up a PAC that raised money and supported candidates to actually implement youth voter campaign plans. Didn't matter who you were, as long as you were actually using that funding. And we would bring with it a trainer from our campaign team to go help figure out how to actually target and reach young voters. And we started hosting forums where we would televise them on like major networks and invite all the candidates to come meet young people and talk to them directly. And so we're kind of forcing them to start having that conversation. And of course, in the process, young people are hearing from candidates about issues that they care about because they're asking questions. We're starting to break that cycle by getting politicians to reach out to and talk to young voters. Second, we started supporting youth groups, both training but financially, to implement this model in their own communities and figure out how to kind of tweak it to meet the needs of their neighborhoods. And then we relaunched Rock the Vote to support this, so we actually grant money to youth groups around the country, but also provide resources and support them. And then create a national narrative. And then finally, on the narrative, we realized that when you go out and say youth turnout is a bust and young people are apathetic, it doesn't make you really want to then go do something. So we started working both with cultural kind of icons as well as the media themselves to shape the narrative. about the fact that everyone is actually doing this and turnout is on the rise. And so that was kind of coming out of '04, and then finally in 2008, it really came together for us. We had a candidate who, for the first time, did reach out and engage young voters as a critical part of his election strategy. We had massive infrastructure in the youth community that didn't exist before, so we had youth groups in thousands of communities going out and doing the voter registration and doing the voter education and talking to their peers. We had a narrative that shifted from youth turnout a bust to the cover of Time magazine saying, holy cow, it's the year of the youth vote, right? Oh, now I want to be a part of that. So it kind of came together. And on election night 2008, turnout amongst voters under 30 rose to 52%. So it took us, 7 years. And it wasn't just because Obama showed up one day. But we put the work into it, we created models, we figured out how to kind of reverse that cycle, and we've gone from 1 out of 3 to 1 out of 2 voters under 30 voting in America today, which we're really proud of. We have our work cut out for us, though. It's constant, right? So here are the things that we think about as we think about moving ahead. 1, you have to demystify the process. I know it's fairly simple here, and there's a lot of great information available, but no one wants to ask. They don't want to feel stupid. And they also don't want to lecture. So you have to demystify how it works. I think it was the first question that kind of was proposed by the young woman. You're still young at 25. How do I vote for these candidates? What do I do? Get that information out there, make it available. You have to remember different communities need different information. For example, we do all of our voter education materials in 14 different languages because some of our Hispanic youth actually want it in English because they trust that more. Actually, some of our Asian youth, there are real language barriers, and so we have it in 12 Asian languages. I was thinking through what information is needed for each community. We also tap into the public service requirements of our media networks and ask them whether they're sitting at their anchor desk or putting on our own PSAs to make sure just basic information is distributed. And a lot of the ethnic media helps with that too. And then realize that people get their information in lots of different ways. But if you can demystify the process, it actually goes a long way. Second, again, you have to make it relevant. And to me, this means 3 things. So 1, voting has to feel like it is about you. You have something at stake. It's about your issues. And I do think the candidate outreach and party engagement actually goes a long way to addressing this, the candidate forums. I think there's a lot of opportunity right now with some of the citizen engagement models too, where you feel like you're raising an issue, and as you start to participate more and more, those get more and more listened to, obviously. But starting with kind of forcing candidates to pay attention to our issues, it will in turn get some of them addressed. We used to say I love my grandmother, but talking about Social Security and Medicare is not making me feel like this election's about me. Good news is now they talk about student loans too, right? So that's kind of the first part of relevance. You have to feel like it's about you. Second, you also have to feel like you're a part of it, like you can see yourself in it. I was moved by some of the research that was conveyed earlier today, this idea that everyone's doing it. I would go one step further and say all of my friends and peers are doing it, right? I'm a part of this. This is something that is my own. I see myself in this political process. We've actually done a lot of research looking at testing. For example, we did a project with Facebook. So when we asked everyone to say I voted at the end of the midterm election in 2010, and it came up on everyone's Facebook page in the US. And you just click I voted. And ton of people clicked I voted. And it didn't, but we only put it up on like 2/3 of the people's pages, right? And we kept it control. It didn't matter at all. The next time around, we did anyways, next time around, we did that, but we added the names of your friends who've also clicked it. It was like through the roof, right? That social context, that sense of like, all my friends are doing this and I want to be a part of this too, that matters a lot. So make it not just relevant in your issues, but that it's your community is engaged as well. And then I guess the last thing I'll say about that is we've also done some research on this kind of everyone's voting thing. And it works really well if you go out and be like, oh, hey, everyone's voting, you should too. And they go, okay, cool, as long as it's someone that they feel like is part of their community. Except if it's going to be a really low turnout election, and then they're like, yeah, whatever. And it actually depresses turnout because they don't believe you. So just be careful about where you use those findings. But make it relevant. Third is you have to ask. No one shows up if they're not asked. I guess with my audience, I usually talk about throwing a party. You might have heard about the party. People tell you about the party. You saw it posted on Facebook. That's cool. People are tweeting about who's DJing their party. Really great. I might go. But when the person who's hosting the party calls me and says, hey, I'm having this party on Friday. Would you come? I'd love to see you. Oh, I am way more likely to go to that party now, right? And then if they send me a text message like a day before and like, hey, I just want to remind you, we're meeting around 6:30. You want to come out, just making sure you're still coming. Okay, now I really feel like I have to go. And you can see how this adds up. If you want someone to show up and vote, if you want them to vote for you, you have to actually ask them. And that kind of repeated asking actually is a perfect analogy for how all of our voter tactics and voter engagement tests have played out. The fourth one is you do need to create a culture of voting. Three things on this. One, to create a culture of voting, you have to tap into somebody's pride as a voter. When we send text messages or emails that say, voters are going to the polls on Tuesday, they're open from 7 to 7, if you have any questions, text Mary, who's at the info desk, and, or give us a call. It has some impact. When we say voters like you are going to the polls on Tuesday, or, hey, we know you're a voter, wanted to make sure you knew, the turnout almost doubles, right? So creating and investing in this identity of the person as a voter is super important, and it helps create a culture. Second, I think there's something about the cultural norm around voting. Well, we'll play off the last panel, the drunk driving. Remember the drunk driving advertising campaign? Do you remember the designated driver? Or we all heard of the designated driver? Got across the ditch, right? Does anyone know where it came from? It was an academic at Harvard, sociologist, behavioral studies, trying to look at how you change behavior. And it realized that creating a cultural norm is a powerful thing. So went and worked with every television director, screenwriter, went to every writer's room in New York and Los Angeles and talked to every single television show on air that featured a bar. And in every one of those shows throughout the next season, television season, when you walked into a bar in that television show, there was a designated driver. So Cheers, for example, was one of the most watched shows on television at the time. And every time someone had had a drink on air, walked out the door, there was a comment about a designated driver. And it created a cultural norm. Drunk driving incidents just went down exponentially that year and have kind of maintained. So can we create that cultural norm around voting? I think it's super important. We use celebrities and artists to do that, and I think there's a lot of ways, but I think you're at an advantage here in New Zealand, which is, I spend like half a day I talked to the person on the airplane, I was on a radio show, talked to my taxi cab driver. I'm trying desperately to stay awake. I like talking to random people in the hotel lobby. There's a real pride around voting here in this country. It was like smacked me in the face kind of pride. I heard more times than I can count that you're the first country with universal suffrage. Heard about your high voting rates. There's something to tap into there that I think is worth considering, and I think it goes a long way and actually puts you at an incredible advantage. And then lastly, I'll just talk, the last tip is that the message, the messenger, and the medium all really do matter. When you think about the message for young voters, you can't just be out there and be like, yeah, it's awesome, go vote. Because they actually, they have certain attitudes and beliefs, like there's a whole bunch of antics going on, and my voice is often trumped by special interests, or government's not all that effective, and it's frustrating, and those are fairly, I hear them no matter where I go around the world. You can't ignore that, you have to acknowledge it. But then you also have to realize that these young people believe that as a generation they can change the world. The most recent polling we did internationally in partnership with MTV showed nearly 80% of young people in like 20 different countries believe that their generation could change the world. Okay, cool, right? We got this problem, well, let's go do something about it. And ultimately, there is a global generational identity forming. So thinking about these things as you craft a message and the attitudes of youth. Second, thinking about who conveys that message. So obviously, we use artists, we use DJs, we use people that, they don't care what I have to say, but they care about what, the people that, that it's uncool to talk about voting, but when you have someone who's already cool talking about it, it's okay. Right? And then when you have your peers engaging you in that conversation behind, after that, it's now cool to have that conversation. And then you can start to move people forward. So thinking about the messenger, and then ultimately in today's society, there's so many ways to distribute a message, making sure you think about how that's getting out, whether that's through social media, through print, through radio, through word of mouth, through people talking about it on stage. It matters, and different people are reading and using different mediums. So those are kind of the tips that we think about, and I think kind of encapsulate what was spoken about today and really coincide with what we do in the US. I do have more data, case studies, and research on tactics to mobilize the youth vote and youth attitudes than I couldn't even begin to explain. I've been doing this personally for 15 years, and all of our stuff is incredibly data-based. I have pulled a lot of that together, and we'll be hosting workshops tomorrow where we'll get into a lot more of the tactics and nitty-gritty. So, if you actually want to know about some of these tests and research, that's the place. Ultimately, I will make it available because we want to share it. We want more people actually using it, applying it in your own country to ensure that we are, in fact, building what I think of as a global youth movement for democracy. And finally, I do want to actually get to your questions. It's a long day of talking. So I'll leave you with this. I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think it's a moving target. Young people change daily. In my country, 12,000 turn 18 each day. How they engage with each other, how they congregate, and how they get information is rapidly evolving as communities evolve and as technology plays a greater role. The political and media landscape is shifting, and issue concerns vary. It takes work. It takes constant innovation. But isn't that what democracy is all about? This was a grand experiment in self-governance. We have the power to engage and govern ourselves. It doesn't mean you show up once cast a ballot and think, oh, good, this thing's going to run itself. You don't go vote on election day and think, unicorns and rainbows. The change will happen. What voting does is it gives us the power to make change. It gives us the power because we've put representatives in office who actually are accountable to us. It gives us the power to shape our future. But democracy is a participatory sport. It's something in constant motion. And at least in our office, we like to say, it's not a noun, everybody, it's a verb. So in the kind of spirit of motion, movement, and verb, I'm going to end with a quick video. This one's only 30 seconds. And it is a bunch of dancers from a television show called So You Think You Can Dance, and a bunch of artists and television actors from that network who got together.
We will.
We will.
We will.
We will.
We will.
We will.
We will be counted.
We will matter.
We will stand our ground.
We will be brave. Brave. Brave.
We will be heard. Heard.
We will.
We will.
We will.
We will organize.
We will.
Vote.
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 Vote. Vote. Vote.
We will.
Vote.
Because we matter.
Because you matter.
We will vote because we make a difference.
We will vote.
We will. We will.
30 seconds. So, thank you.